long before maps were precise, long before ships crossed oceans with quiet confidence, long before a small needle could tell a traveler where north was. The world was wide in a different way, not empty, not silent, but open and uncertain. To walk across the land in those early times was to move through a world guided mostly by memory and the sky. Paths were known not by signs, but by stories. Follow the river until the rocks look like sleeping animals. Turn where the old tree leans toward the valley. Keep the mountains on your left. These were directions shaped by the land itself. They worked well, as long as the land remained familiar, as long as the sky was clear, as long as the journey stayed within the edges of what people already knew. During the day, the sun was a quiet guide. It rose in one place, traveled steadily, and sank somewhere else. Its movement helped travelers feel the passage of time and direction at once. Morning light touched one side of the hills. Evening light stretched shadows long across the ground. But even the sun could not solve everything. Clouds drifted in from far away. Fog gathered in valleys. Storms blurred the sky into a soft grey ceiling where no direction could be read. And when night came, the world changed completely. Shapes softened, colours faded, landmarks dissolved into shadow. The familiar path could become strange in the dark. A bend in the road might feel like a different place. A stand of trees could seem like a wall where none existed. Night did not threaten, but it concealed. Travellers slowed their steps, listening carefully to the sounds around them. The crunch of gravel, the whisper of wind in grass, the distant call of an animal. Without clear sight, the world had to be understood through other senses. Above, the stars shone. They were constant companions, scattered across the sky in quiet patterns. Those who knew them well could follow their movement. Certain stars rose in the same places each night. Some seemed fixed while others slowly circled around them. But learning the sky took time. It required patience, memory, and long hours spent looking upward. Not everyone had that knowledge, and even those who did sometimes found their view hidden by clouds or trees. On land, people often traveled in groups, not only for safety, but for shared memory. One person might remember the shape of a hill. Another might recall where a river curved. Together, they pieced the landscape into a living map made of conversation and recollection. Journeys were slower then, not because people were unwilling to move, but because movement required attention. Every step was part of an ongoing conversation between the traveler and the world. Does this look familiar? Didn't we pass a rock like this before? Is the wind coming from the same direction as this morning? The land itself became a guide and a puzzle. In forests, direction could disappear entirely. Trees stood close together, their trunks forming repeating patterns that confused the eye. The ground might slope gently, offering no clear sign of north or south. Leaves rustled overhead, masking the subtle sounds that might otherwise hint at open space or water. In such places, people moved carefully, marking their path with small signs. A broken twig, a pile of stones, a strip of cloth tied to a branch. These signs were messages left for themselves, quiet reminders of the way back. In deserts, the challenge was different. The land stretched wide and open, but landmarks were few. Dunes shifted with the wind. Tracks vanished quickly. The sun blazed above, steady but relentless, making every direction feel the same under its bright gaze. Travelers learned to read the smallest clues. the angle of shadows, the pattern of windswept sand, the distant outline of hills against the horizon. Still, without a constant reference, uncertainty lingered. Water routes brought their own mysteries. Rivers curved and branched. Lakes reflected the sky, confusing the eye at a distance. And the sea was a world without edges. Sailors ventured out guided by coastlines and memory. They watched the shore fade into the distance and felt a subtle unease when it vanished completely. On open water, direction became a matter of trust. Trust in experience, trust in the stars, trust in the wind's behavior. But winds could change. Currents could pull a vessel off course without anyone noticing. Days could pass under a sky that looked the same in every direction. In those moments, the vastness of the world felt especially real. Not frightening, but humbling. A reminder that humans moved across only a small part of something much larger. To live in such a world required acceptance of uncertainty. People did not expect perfect knowledge of where they were. They expected to adapt, to pause when unsure, to wait for clearer weather, to retrace steps when needed. Journeys were not straight lines from one point to another. They were gentle curves shaped by terrain, weather, and memory. Sometimes, travelers would stop for the night, not because they had reached their destination, but because the light had faded and the path ahead felt unclear. A fire would be lit, food shared, stories told. In the flickering glow, direction no longer mattered. The world shrank to the circle of light and the people within it. Morning would bring clarity again. This rhythm of movement and pause, certainty and uncertainty, was part of life. Without tools to fix direction in a single glance, people developed a deeper relationship with the land and sky. They noticed small changes, the way moss grew more thickly on one side of trees, the direction birds flew at certain times of day, the angle of mountain ridges against the horizon. All these became quiet clues in a larger, ever-changing puzzle. Yet for all this skill, there were still moments when direction slipped away completely. A sudden storm at sea, a dense fog on land, a night when clouds hid every star. In those times, people waited. They did not force their way forward blindly. They rested, listened, and hoped for clearer signs. This patience was a form of wisdom, an understanding that not every path must be walked immediately. Sometimes the world asked for stillness before movement. In such a world, the idea of a small object that could always point in one direction would have seemed almost magical. A steady reference, unaffected by clouds or darkness. A guide that did not rely on memory or guesswork. But that idea lay in the future. For now, direction was something felt rather than fixed, something discovered step by step. The land was read like a story, and every journey was a conversation with it. And though uncertainty was part of travel, it was also part of wonder. To move without perfect knowledge meant to notice more, to look closely, to listen carefully, to remain aware of the world in a way that constant certainty might not allow. In this early time before the compass, people walked through landscapes that felt vast, not only in distance, but in possibility. Every bend in the path might reveal something new. Every ridge might offer a view that changed the understanding of where they stood. The world was not mapped in lines, but in experiences, not measured by coordinates, but by memories. And as night settled once more over fields and forests, mountains and seas, travelers rested beneath the open sky. Stars slowly wheeled above them, silent and steady. They did not yet have a small needle to tell them where north lay, but they had the sky, the land, and the quiet patience to move when the way became clear. And somewhere, hidden in the earth, a magnetic stone waited, its quiet pull toward the north still unnoticed, for now. When the sun disappeared beyond the edge of the land, when the sky deepened from blue to violet to velvet black, another guide slowly revealed itself. The stars, long before compasses rested in pockets, long before maps could be unfolded with certainty, people looked upward and found direction written in light. Night did not take guidance away. It simply moved it from the ground to the sky. Above the quiet earth, patterns stretched across the darkness, points of light that seemed scattered at first glance, but to patient eyes formed shapes, lines, and stories. Some stars wandered slowly across the sky over the course of a night. Others rose and set with the seasons. But one star, nearly still, held a special place. The star we now call Polaris, the North Star. It did not shine brighter than all others, but it held a quiet reliability. Night after night, it remained in nearly the same place, a small point around which the rest of the sky seemed to turn. To find it was to find north, and so, in open fields and on quiet hillsides, travelers paused after sunset and tilted their heads back. They searched not for the brightest light, but for a steady one. Some learned to trace their way to Polaris by following familiar constellations. The shape of the Big Dipper, like a great ladle in the sky, pointed the way. Its outer stars formed a line that led gently to the North Star. This knowledge passed not through books, but through voices. A parent pointing upward on a clear night, an elder tracing invisible lines between stars with a finger. See that shape? Follow those two stars. They lead you north. The sky became a map that moved, but moved in patterns that could be learned. For people traveling across wide lands, this celestial map offered reassurance, a path through darkness. In deserts, where dunes shifted and landmarks vanished with the wind, the stars remained steady. In open plains, where the horizon stretched unbroken in every direction, the night sky offered structure. And at sea, where the world seemed to dissolve into endless water and sky, the stars were companions that never drifted out of reach. Sailors stood on wooden decks under wide, open heavens. The ship creaked softly. Waves tapped against its sides. Above them, constellations wheeled in slow, predictable arcs. A sailor who knew the stars did not feel entirely lost, even when no land was in sight. They could look upward and say, "We are still heading north," or "We have drifted too far west." The sky was not only a guide, but a comfort, a reminder that even in vastness, there were fixed points. Night navigation required patience. There was no quick glance, no instant answer. A traveler had to stop, breathe, and let their eyes adjust. Stars emerged slowly as darkness deepened. The longer one looked, the more appeared. Faint lights, barely visible at first, joined the brighter ones, forming a rich tapestry overhead. In these quiet moments, navigation became a kind of meditation. The body rested, the mind focused. The world narrowed to the soft glow of distant suns. Even time could be felt through the sky. The position of certain stars marked the passing of hours. As constellations rose in the east and sank in the west, travelers could sense how the night moved around them. The sky became not just a compass, but a clock. Yet star navigation was never perfect. It depended on clear skies and open views. Dense forests could hide the horizon. Mountains could block large portions of the sky. And sometimes clouds drifted in from nowhere, soft and silent, covering the stars one by one. A sky full of direction could fade into a blank grey ceiling. In those moments, even the most experienced traveler had to wait. The night grew deeper, the air cooled, sounds carried farther in the stillness. Without the stars, direction returned to uncertainty. At sea, the challenge was even greater. A ship might sail smoothly under a clear sky for days, guided by Polaris and familiar constellations. Then suddenly, fog could rise from the water like a curtain. The horizon vanished. The stars dimmed, then disappeared. Sea and sky blended into one pale emptiness. In that silence, sailors felt the limits of their knowledge. They could steer by memory, by the feel of wind and current. But without the sky, certainty faded. Still, the practice of star navigation shaped how people understood the world. It encouraged observation, patience, connection to cycles larger than a single day or journey. Travelers learned that direction was not only a matter of ground and landmarks, but of patterns that stretched far beyond the earth. To follow the stars was to move in harmony with the turning of the planet itself. Each night, sky told a story that repeated with gentle variations. Winter constellations gave way to summer ones. Familiar patterns shifted slowly over the months, reminding travelers of the passing seasons. In this way, navigation became woven into the rhythm of life. Journeys were planned with the sky in mind. Certain routes were safer when specific stars were visible. Knowledge of the heavens was as valuable as knowledge of rivers or roads. Yet for all its beauty and reliability, the sky remained out of reach. It could guide, but only when seen. It could reassure, but only when clear. And so, even as generations learned to trust the stars, a quiet limitation lingered. Guidance that depended on weather and visibility could never be constant. Travelers accepted this with patience. They rested when the sky hid itself. They waited for clouds to part. They understood that direction, like many things in life, sometimes required stillness before movement. And beneath that ever-turning sky, somewhere in the earth, lay a different kind of guide, one that did not depend on light or clear horizons. But that discovery belonged to another chapter. For now, travelers moved beneath constellations that shimmered softly overhead, finding their way by distant fires in the sky, until clouds gathered and the stars were hidden from view. But clouds can cover the sky, and the sea can hide every landmark. After long nights spent watching the stars, after journeys guided by constellations and the quiet patience of the sky, people still lived with one simple truth. Direction could vanish. Clouds could hide the heavens. Fog could swallow the horizon. Forests and mountains could block the familiar shapes of land. And yet, beneath their feet, hidden in the earth, lay something quietly extraordinary, a stone that seemed to know a direction of its own. Long before anyone understood why, people in different parts of the world began to notice certain rocks that behaved in unusual ways. These stones were dark, heavy, and unremarkable at first glance. But when placed near small pieces of iron, something subtle happened. The iron moved, not quickly, not dramatically, just a gentle pull, as if the stone were breathing in the metal. These stones came to be known as lodestones, naturally magnetized pieces of the mineral magnetite. To ancient eyes, they must have seemed like objects with a hidden will, a quiet force that could not be seen, only felt. At first, This attraction to iron was simply a curiosity, a small wonder of nature, a stone that pulled another object toward it without rope or hand. People carried such stones as oddities, showing them to friends, passing them around by firelight. "Look," someone might say softly, placing a small iron needle near the stone. And others would watch as the needle trembled, then leaned closer, as though drawn by an invisible thread. No one spoke of magnetism yet. There were no words for unseen fields or forces. There was only observation, a patient noticing of how the stone behaved. Over time, another detail emerged. If a small piece of iron was stroked against the lodestone in the same direction, again and again, something changed. The iron itself began to behave like the stone. It, too, could attract other small bits of metal, and more quietly still, when allowed to move freely, this magnetized piece of iron would turn. Not randomly, not endlessly. It would settle in a particular direction. At first, this may have gone unnoticed, a subtle turning of a needle on a string or floating on water. But careful observers began to see a pattern. Again and again, the iron seemed to favor the same alignment. If turned away, it would drift back. If spun around, it would slowly return, as though guided by a silent hand. This was not the sky, not the sun or stars. The direction came from the earth itself. The idea must have felt both strange and beautiful, that the ground beneath one's feet, the vast land and sea, held a hidden order, a direction woven into its structure. People experimented gently. They placed magnetized needles on leaves floating in bowls of water. They suspended them from fine threads. They watched quietly as the needle turned and rested. Again and again, it pointed the same way. To those who had spent nights searching the sky for Polaris, this discovery carried a familiar comfort. Here was another steady guide, not above, but below, not visible in light, but present even in darkness. The lodestone itself remained a quiet marvel. It did not glow, it did not hum. It simply existed, holding within it a force that needed no explanation to be useful. Early thinkers described it in poetic ways. A stone with a soul, a rock that loved iron. Language reached for meaning where science had not yet arrived. Yet even without understanding, people recognized value. They did not rush. They did not build large devices overnight. They observed. They tried small things. They learned how to magnetize needles more reliably. They discovered that certain directions of stroking worked better than others. Each step was slow, thoughtful, a quiet conversation between human curiosity and natural mystery. The lodestone did not replace the stars. It did not suddenly solve every problem of navigation, but it offered something new, a reference point that did not depend on weather, a guide that could be carried in a pouch, something small, humble, and always ready. In a dimly lit room, someone might sit beside a bowl of water, watching a thin sliver of metal float on the surface. They might nudge it gently, then wait. Slowly, almost shyly, it would turn and settle. In that moment, direction was no longer only a matter of sky and landscape. It was held in a simple object, quiet as breath. The mystery of the magnetic stone did not demand loud celebration. It invited patience, a kind of wonder that grows in stillness. People did not yet know they were standing at the beginning of one of the most important navigation tools in history. They only knew that this stone, this unassuming piece of earth, held a secret, a pull toward the north that could not be argued with. And as more people learned of this behavior, curiosity deepened. If a stone could guide iron, and iron could guide itself, what else might be possible? Small observations turned into gentle trials. Hands moved carefully. Needles were balanced more precisely. Water bowls were steadied against the wind. Each experiment quiet, almost meditative. A new form of guidance was slowly taking shape, not carved from the sky, but drawn from the earth. And from this quiet wonder, this simple stone that leaned always in one direction, curiosity turned into quiet experimentation. After the quiet wonder of the magnetic stone, after hands had felt its gentle pull on iron, curiosity began to move from observation into careful action. The stone itself was heavy, irregular, not always easy to carry, but a thin piece of iron, a needle that could be shaped, balanced, and set in motion. That was something different. In small rooms lit by oil lamps, in courtyards warmed by afternoon sun, people began to repeat a simple motion. They took a small iron needle and stroked it along the surface of a lodestone, always in the same direction. Again and again and again. No sparks, no sound, only a quiet transfer of something unseen. The needle did not change color. It did not glow. But when brought near other bits of metal, it showed a new behavior, a faint, steady attraction. More curious still was what happened when the needle was allowed to move freely. One method was simple and almost poetic. A shallow bowl of water, a small leaf placed gently on the surface, and on that leaf, the thin iron needle. The water held the leaf steady, yet free to turn. The needle rested lightly, balanced between stillness and motion. At first, it drifted aimlessly, moved by tiny currents in the water. But slowly, very slowly, it began to turn. No hand touched it, no wind pushed it. It rotated with quiet determination until it reached a position where it seemed to settle. If someone nudged the bowl or brushed the leaf, the needle would shift again. But given time, it returned. Again and again, it chose the same direction. This movement was small, barely noticeable unless watched with patience. Yet it held enormous meaning. For the first time, direction was no longer only in the sky, no longer only in mountains or rivers. It lived in a tiny piece of metal, floating in a bowl of water. People repeated the experiment. Different needles, different bowls, different places. The result was the same, a quiet turning and a steady rest pointing north. Some suspended the needle from a thread instead, a fine fiber tied to its center, allowing it to spin freely in the air. It twirled gently, then slowed, then aligned itself in the now familiar direction. This tiny movement must have felt like a whisper from the earth itself. Not loud, not dramatic, but consistent, reliable, unmoved by clouds, night, or fog. The first magnetic needle did not look like a tool. It looked like a simple household object resting on water. But within that simplicity lay a new way of understanding the world. Travelers who had relied on memory and sky could now carry a piece of guidance with them, even in darkness, even in places where stars were hidden. The leaf in the bowl became more than a quiet experiment. It became proof that direction could be held, not just observed. Some may have watched the needle turn by lamplight late into the night, mesmerized by its slow, certain movement. Others may have carried magnetized needles on journeys, testing them under open skies and over long distances. The needle did not shout its direction. It did not spin wildly. It simply leaned, a gentle insistence toward the north. In a world where direction had often been uncertain, this small certainty felt like a gift. The earliest magnetic needles were fragile guides. They required calm conditions, a steady hand, still water, but they opened the door to something larger. They showed that the earth itself held a pattern that could be followed. That direction was not only written in the heavens, but woven into the planet below. Over time, people sought ways to protect the needle, to place it in small containers, to shield it from wind and movement. The floating leaf gave way to more stable forms, but the heart of the idea remained the same. A slender piece of metal, quietly turning, until it found its place. The movement was so small that it invited stillness. To see it clearly, one had to slow down, to wait, to let the needle settle. In this way, the first compass needle was not only a guide for travel, but a teacher of patience. Direction revealed itself gently to those willing to pause and watch. And from this humble beginning, a magnetized needle on water, a new companion for travelers began to take shape, small, silent, faithful to the unseen pull of the earth. Soon, this simple idea began to travel, from the quiet bowl of water, from the leaf that turned gently beneath a floating needle. An idea began to take shape. The needle could point. The earth itself could guide. Now, slowly, patiently, people began to give that idea a home. A small space, a protected place where the needle could rest, turn, and be carried without losing its delicate balance. The earliest true compasses were simple, not polished instruments, not yet the round devices we recognize today. They were small boxes, often made of wood, sometimes lined with metal. Inside, a magnetized needle rested on a pivot or floated on a tiny support. Above it, a clear surface, glass or polished material, kept wind and touch from disturbing its motion. The needle no longer drifted freely on water. It turned within a quiet chamber, protected from movement. And when it settled, it pointed north. This small change, placing the needle in a container, transformed an experiment into a tool. A floating curiosity became a companion for travel. A traveler could now carry direction in a pocket, not a heavy stone, not a bowl of water, but a compact object, quiet and steady. The compass did not shout its presence. It did not glow or ring. It simply waited, its needle poised above a marked surface. Many early compasses were marked not with degrees, but with simple indicators. North, south, east, west, the four directions that framed the world. Some were decorated with symbols of wind or seasons. Others were plain, functional, meant only to guide. In a dimly lit room, someone might sit with a newly made compass in hand. They would tilt it gently, watching the needle shift. Then they would hold it still and wait. The movement was always the same, a slow turning, a pause, a quiet alignment. This steadiness inspired confidence. Where once direction had depended on sky or memory, now it lived in a small object. The compass did not replace the stars or the sun. It worked alongside them. In daylight, a traveler might still glance at the sun's path. At night, they might still look for Polaris. But now, even under heavy clouds, even in deep forest, they could open a small box and find north. The change was subtle but profound. It did not make journeys faster. It made them calmer. A traveler who carried a compass still had to walk, climb, and navigate terrain. But they no longer carried the same quiet uncertainty. They could check their path at any moment. A quick glance downward instead of upward. A conversation with the earth rather than the sky. Early compasses varied in form. Some were square boxes with lids, others were round, carved from wood or metal. The needle might rest on a small spike, balanced carefully so that the slightest force could turn it. Craftspeople refined the design over time. They learned that the needle must be light, that the pivot must be sharp and smooth, that even small vibrations could affect the movement. The compass became a delicate instrument, requiring care. Yet it was also durable in spirit. Even if dropped or shaken, the needle would still find its way back. Again and again, it returned to north. Travelers began to trust this quiet consistency. In forests, they could walk in a straight line rather than circling unknowingly. In open plains, they could keep their direction even when landmarks were distant. In fog, they could move with more confidence, guided by something unseen but reliable. The compass did not eliminate mistakes, but it reduced doubt. It gave people a steady reference in a shifting world. This small object also changed how people thought about space. Direction was no longer only something external. It was something that could be carried, held in the hand, consulted in private. The compass created a new relationship between traveler and Earth. The world was still vast, still filled with unknowns. But one element, direction, became quietly dependable. Imagine a traveler at dawn, mist rising from the ground. The landscape looks different than it did the night before. Shadows are long. Familiar shapes seem altered. The traveler opens a small wooden box. Inside, the needle trembles, then rests. North. A simple word, confirmed without question. The traveler nods, closes the box, and continues on. This is the quiet power of the compass. Not dramatic, not loud, but steady, reliable. Over time, the compass moved from curiosity to necessity. It appeared in the hands of traders, pilgrims, explorers, not always understood in theory, but trusted in practice. People did not need to know why the needle turned. They only needed to see that it did. The compass taught patience as much as direction. To use it well, one had to hold it level, to wait for the needle to settle, to read it calmly. It rewarded stillness and care, and in return, it offered guidance that did not fade with the light. From these simple boxes and turning needles, a new chapter in human travel began. A chapter where direction could be consulted at any moment, where the earth itself became a quiet partner in every journey. And from the hands of travelers, the compass slowly reached the sea. On land, the compass brought quiet confidence. In forests, across plains, through valleys and hills, a traveler could pause, open a small case, and find direction waiting patiently inside. But it was on the sea that the compass became something even more essential. The sea is a place without edges, no trees, no mountains, no roads or stones to remember, only water, stretching outward until it blends with the sky. When a ship leaves the shoreline, something changes. At first, land is still visible, a dark line against the horizon. Then it softens, then it fades, and finally, it disappears completely. Beyond that moment, there are no landmarks at all, only the slow rise and fall of waves and the wide dome of the sky above. Before the compass, sailors relied on memory, wind, and stars. By day, they watched the sun. By night, they searched for Polaris and familiar constellations. But the sea does not always offer a clear sky. Fog can rise from the water without warning, wrapping ship and crew in soft grey silence. Clouds can thicken overhead, hiding every star. Storms can turn the sky into a single moving wall of shadow. In those moments, even experienced sailors felt the weight of uncertainty. The wind still blew, the ship still moved, but direction, the quiet sense of where one was headed, could slip away. A ship might drift slightly off course without anyone noticing at first. A small change in wind, a gentle push from a current, and the vessel would be moving steadily. Somewhere. But where? This is where the compass found its true home. On the wooden decks of ships, in cabins that rocked gently with the motion of the sea, a small box rested on a table or was held carefully in hand. Inside, the needle turned as it always did, untroubled by clouds, unconcerned with fog. While the sky hid its signs and the sea erased its landmarks, the compass remained steady. Sailors learned to trust this quiet companion. They did not stare at it constantly. Instead, they checked it at intervals, like a conversation that needed only occasional words, a glance, a small adjustment of the ship's heading, then back to the work of sails, ropes, and water. In heavy fog, the world shrank to a few ship lengths in every direction. Voices sounded closer than they were. Waves seemed to come from nowhere. But below deck, or in a sheltered place near the helm, the compass needle still pointed north. It offered a thread of certainty in a place where everything else felt soft and shifting. The sea taught patience. Long voyages unfolded slowly. Days passed with little change in scenery. The horizon remained the same gentle curve, morning to evening. But beneath that sameness, the ship moved across vast distances. Without a compass, that movement could feel like drifting. With a compass, it became a path, a line drawn across the invisible surface of the ocean. Sailors began to mark their direction carefully. They noted the angle between their ship's course and the north indicated by the needle. They combined this with knowledge of wind and current. Step by step, they built a sense of where they were going. The compass did not replace skill. It worked with it. An experienced sailor still watched the color of the water, the behavior of birds, the smell of land carried faintly on the wind. But the compass added something new, a quiet reassurance that even when every visible guide vanished, direction remained. At night, when stars shone clearly, the compass and sky worked together. The needle confirmed what the stars suggested, and when clouds rolled in, the compass carried on alone. Ships began to carry their compasses in protected places, shielded from sudden movement. Some were placed in gimbaled mounts, allowing the compass to stay level, even as the ship tilted with the waves. This small innovation made the compass even more reliable at sea. The ocean is never still, but the needle, balanced carefully, could still find its north. In this way, the compass became more than a tool. It became part of a sailor's daily rhythm. Morning checks, midday adjustments, evening confirmations. Not dramatic gestures, but small habits that shaped long journeys. There must have been moments when a sailor stood alone at night, wind moving softly across the deck, stars hidden behind clouds, the sea a dark, endless expanse. In the hand, a small compass, inside the needle resting calmly. North, a single word, steady as breath. In that quiet moment, the sailor was not lost, not drifting without anchor, but moving with intention, guided by a force deeper than wind or wave. The compass did not make the sea less vast. It made the journey through it more certain. And as ships carried this small instrument across wider and wider waters, the world itself began to feel more connected. Paths formed across oceans, invisible but reliable. routes that could be followed again and again, all because a tiny needle, hidden in a wooden box, refused to forget where north lay. But the compass did not belong only to the ocean. While ships carried the compass across wide and shifting seas, another journey was unfolding far from the water. On dusty roads, in deep forests, across mountain passes and open plains, here too the small needle found its place. Travel on land had always depended on memory and landmarks. A twisted tree, a bend in the river, a ridge shaped like a sleeping animal. These signs guided people from village to village, valley to valley. But as journeys stretched farther, as trade routes grew longer, as caravans crossed lands unfamiliar even to seasoned travelers, memory alone was not always enough. A forest could stretch for days, its trees repeating like quiet patterns with no clear difference from one place to the next. Mountains could hide valleys beyond sight, twisting paths into shapes that confused even those who had walked them before. Deserts offered open space but few fixed points. Wind reshaped the surface of the land overnight, erasing yesterday's footprints. Into this wide and varied world, the compass came quietly, not as a grand invention, not as a symbol of power, but as a small object resting in a pocket or pouch, waiting to be opened. A traveler walking alone along a narrow path might pause at a crossroads where two trails looked equally worn. No signs, no familiar rock or tree. They would reach into their clothing, pull out a small case, and open it carefully. Inside, the needle would tremble for a moment, then settle. North, a single, steady answer. The traveler would close the lid, tuck the compass away, and choose the path that matched their intended direction. No drama, no announcement, just a quiet decision, supported by a silent guide. Caravans crossing wide lands began to carry compasses as well. Long lines of people and animals moved slowly across plains and deserts, carrying goods between distant cities. At the head of the caravan, someone responsible for direction would check the compass from time to time. The group might travel by day under the sun and by night under the stars. But when sandstorms blurred the horizon or dust filled the air, the compass offered reassurance. Even when the world looked the same in every direction, north still existed. In forests, the compass brought a different kind of calm. Trees blocked the sky. The sun appeared only in scattered beams through leaves. Paths curved around roots and stones, twisting gently without clear pattern. A person walking alone could easily drift in a slow circle without noticing. But with a compass, they could keep a steady line. Not straight like a road, but consistent in direction. The needle became a quiet friend in places where sight was limited. Mountain travelers found the compass useful in another way. High ridges offered wide views, but valleys and passes could be disorienting. Mist often clung to slopes, hiding distant landmarks. The compass did not show the safest path or the easiest climb, but it reminded travelers where they were headed. A mountain pass that curved unexpectedly could still lead in the right direction, confirmed by the steady needle. The compass did not replace knowledge of terrain. It worked beside it. Shepherds, traders, pilgrims, and messengers all began to carry this small instrument. Not all understood the science behind it. Few thought about magnetism or the Earth's invisible forces. What mattered was simple and practical. The needle pointed north, always. In this reliability, people found confidence. Journeys still took time. Feet still grew tired. Weather still changed without warning. But direction no longer felt as fragile. A traveler resting beside a small fire at dusk might take out the compass and glance at it, not because they needed to move, but because they could. It was a quiet habit, like checking the sky or listening to the wind. The compass connected them to the wider world, even in stillness. It told them where they were in relation to everything else. North, south, east, west. Invisible lines stretching across land and sea. The compass turned direction into something personal, not only something learned from elders or read in the sky, but something held in the hand, something consulted privately, something that belonged to the individual journey. Over time, compasses became more refined, cases grew sturdier, markings became clearer. Some included simple scales or additional symbols, but their heart remained the same, a small needle, balanced lightly, responding to the earth. The presence of the compass changed how people felt about distance. Faraway places no longer seemed as unreachable. Routes could be followed more consistently. Paths could be retraced with greater ease. The world did not shrink, but it became more navigable, more connected, more open to exploration. Still, the compass remained humble. It did not command attention. It did not alter the beauty of landscapes or the challenges of terrain. It simply offered a quiet thread of certainty woven through the experience of travel, a whisper of direction in a vast and varied world. As journeys grew longer, the world itself began to feel different. As the compass moved quietly from hand to hand, from traveler to trader, from caravan leader to ship captain, something subtle began to shift. The world itself did not grow smaller. Mountains did not lower. Oceans did not narrow. But the feeling of the world began to change. Before the compass, distance carried a deeper uncertainty. A road might lead to a known town, or wander somewhere unfamiliar. A sea voyage might follow the coast, or drift beyond sight of land with only memory and stars as guides. People did not only fear storms or hunger, they feared losing direction, losing the quiet thread that tied them to home. The compass softened that fear, not completely, but enough to make longer journeys feel possible. A trader could travel beyond familiar valleys and still know which way led back. A messenger could cross forests and plains with more confidence that the path ahead did not twist into a circle. A sailor could leave the coastline behind and follow an invisible line across open water. These small certainties added up. Routes that were once taken rarely or only in certain seasons became more dependable. Paths between cities grew steadier. Trade flowed more smoothly. People began to move not just out of necessity, but with a growing sense that the world could be crossed with intention. As travelers returned from longer journeys, they brought back more than goods and stories. They brought knowledge of direction and distance. They could say, with more precision than before, "We traveled north for many days, then turned west," or "The river lies to the east of the mountain pass." This information slowly gathered into maps. Early maps had been symbolic, shaped by stories and landmarks rather than measured paths. But now, direction could be recorded more carefully. Lines could be drawn with reference to north, not only to memory. Map makers began to use compasses alongside observation. They noted the direction of roads, rivers, and coastlines with increasing care. The result was not immediate perfection. Maps still contained gaps, distortions, and unknown regions, but the sense of order grew. The world began to look less like a collection of separate places and more like a connected whole. Land and sea, once separated by uncertainty, became linked by routes that could be followed again and again. Explorers ventured farther, not recklessly, but with a quiet trust in their tools. They still watched the sky, they still read the land, but the compass gave them a steady partner in every step. With it, they could return the way they had come. They could chart new paths and share them with others. As more people used compasses, a shared understanding of direction emerged. North was no longer only a star in the sky. It was a point on a map, a reference for roads, borders, and boundaries. Villages and cities began to be described in relation to one another more consistently. North of the river, east of the hills, south of the old road. These phrases gained clearer meaning when tied to a common directional reference. The compass helped people imagine space beyond what they could see. Even when standing in one place, they could picture the directions stretching outward. They could think of distant lands not only as stories, but as places located along a path. This quiet mental shift changed how people related to the world. It did not remove mystery. There were still unknown regions, blank spaces on maps, distant lands few had seen. But those spaces felt more reachable, more part of the same world. Journeys grew longer not only because ships improved or roads expanded, but because people trusted direction. Confidence in navigation encouraged movement. Movement encouraged connection. And connection slowly reshaped the human experience of distance. Markets filled with goods from faraway places. Ideas traveled alongside trade routes. Cultures met and blended at crossroads that had once been isolated. The compass, small and silent, played its part in all of this. It did not build roads or ships. It did not carry goods or people. It simply pointed north. Yet in doing so, it supported every journey that relied on knowing where one was headed. Maps continued to grow more detailed. Coastlines were traced more accurately. Mountain ranges found their place on paper. Rivers were drawn with clearer paths. The world was still vast, still full of wonder, but it was no longer endlessly uncertain in the same way. Direction had become something stable, something shared. People still got lost. Storms still blew ships off course. Paths still disappeared in forests and deserts. But the compass offered a way back, a steady reference that waited patiently to be consulted. And yet, even as the world became clearer, the compass itself remained simple. By now, the compass has traveled across oceans, crossed forests and deserts, rested in the pockets of travelers and the cabins of ships. But in this quiet moment, we do not follow the journey. We pause. We hold the compass in our hand. It is small, smaller than the palm, often round, sometimes square. Its weight is gentle, just enough to feel real, not enough to tire the fingers. The outer case may be made of brass, smooth and slightly cool to the touch, or perhaps dark wood, worn soft at the edges from years of use. When you turn it slowly in your hand, it catches the light in a muted way. Not a bright shine, but a warm, steady glow. Your thumb rests along its side. Your fingers curl naturally beneath it. It is not a complicated object. No buttons, no moving parts on the outside. Just a quiet presence, waiting to be opened. When the lid lifts, if it has one, there is a faint, soft sound, a whisper of metal against metal. Inside, under a thin sheet of glass, the needle rests. The glass is smooth, cool, and clear. Your fingertip might trace its surface gently, feeling the faint curve where it meets the metal rim. Beneath the glass lies the heart of the compass, a slender needle, balanced at its center. One end, often marked darker or painted, to show north. It does not lie flat and still like an object at rest. It lives in a state of quiet readiness. If your hand moves slightly, the needle responds. A soft tremble, a tiny swing. Then, stillness again. You hold the compass level. This is important. Not forced, not stiff, just steady. The needle begins to turn, slowly, deliberately. It does not rush. It glides through the air inside its small chamber, as though carried by an invisible current. You can almost feel the motion through your fingertips, though the glass stands between. A gentle awareness that something inside is moving, aligning, choosing its direction. Then it settles. North. The needle does not lock into place. It rests there lightly, as if balanced on a breath. If you tilt the compass, it stirs again. A quiet, graceful correction. Back to north. The sensation is subtle but deeply calming. A small object responding to forces too quiet to see, yet strong enough to guide. You might notice the tiny markings beneath the needle. Letters at the edges. N, S, E, W. Sometimes numbers. Sometimes simple lines. They form a circle, a complete world contained in the palm of your hand. Your thumb shifts slightly, feeling the edge of the casing. It may be smooth from years of use. Tiny scratches, nearly invisible, hint at journeys taken. A pocket companion that has traveled through rain, dust, cold mornings, and warm evenings. When you close the lid, the world inside disappears, but the needle continues its quiet work, ready for the next time it is needed. There is something deeply reassuring about this object. It asks for nothing. It does not make noise, does not demand attention. Yet when called upon, it offers certainty. Holding a compass is different from looking at a map or watching the stars. It is personal, direct. The direction comes not from the sky or the horizon, but from the center of your own hand. The connection feels intimate, a private conversation between you and the earth. You turn slowly in place. The world around you shifts. Trees move across your view. Mountains slide along the edge of sight. But inside the compass, the needle moves in the opposite way, adjusting so that north remains where it always is. There is quiet poetry in that motion. The world turns, you turn, but the needle keeps its promise. In moments of stillness, simply holding the compass can feel grounding, a reminder that direction exists even when you are not moving, even when you are resting, even when the path ahead is not yet chosen. The metal warms slowly to the touch of your hand. The glass reflects a faint image of the sky above or the room around you. The needle waits. In this small circle of metal and glass, the vastness of the earth is reduced to a single line, north and south, east and west, all held in a space no larger than a watch. The compass does not explain the world. It does not show mountains or rivers. It offers only one quiet truth. Here is north. The rest is up to you. In the end, the compass was never loud. It never demanded attention. The journey slows now. Footsteps that once crossed valleys and ridges, that followed coastlines and forest paths, have come to rest for the night. A traveler sits beside a small fire. The flames are low, no longer leaping, only glowing, orange and gold, breathing softly in the dark. Beyond the circle of firelight, the world fades into shadow. Trees stand as quiet silhouettes. Hills are only shapes against the deeper sky. The air is still, cool, and calm. Above, clouds drift slowly. sometimes parting to reveal a few scattered stars. Not enough to guide a journey, but enough to remind the traveler of the vastness beyond sight. Beside the traveler, on a folded piece of cloth, lies a small object, a compass. Its surface catches the firelight in a muted glow, not shining brightly, just warm, steady, present. The traveler reaches for it, not out of urgency, but habit. Fingers curl around the cool metal case. It opens with a soft, familiar motion. Inside, beneath the glass, the needle stirs. For a moment, it trembles gently, responding to the movement of the hand. Then the traveler holds it still. The needle begins its quiet turn. Not hurried, not uncertain, just a smooth, patient motion until it rests. North. The traveler looks at it, then out into the darkness beyond the firelight. There is no path visible now, no road to follow. Tonight is for rest, not movement. Still, the knowledge of direction brings a quiet comfort. Even in stillness, the world has order. Even in darkness, there is a sense of place. The fire crackles softly. A small ember breaks apart and glows brighter for a moment before fading. Somewhere in the distance, a night bird calls once, then falls silent again. The compass remains open on the cloth, its needle steady, unmoved by the shifting clouds above, untroubled by the absence of landmarks. It does not sleep, it does not grow tired, it simply waits. The traveler leans back, looking up at the sky, eyes growing heavy. Tomorrow will bring more walking, more choices, more paths to follow. But not now. Now there is only the gentle rhythm of breath, the warmth of fading embers, and the small presence of the compass nearby. A quiet companion that asks for nothing, that speaks only when asked, that offers direction without insistence. The world is still vast. Mountains, rivers, forests, seas, all waiting beyond the edge of night. But the traveler no longer feels lost within it. Direction is no longer something that can vanish completely. It rests quietly beside them, under glass, in a circle of metal no larger than a palm. The fire dims further. Shadows grow softer. The compass needle remains calm, pointing north as it always does. And in this quiet ending, the journey does not feel like a line from one place to another. It feels like a gentle unfolding, step by step, moment by moment, guided by small certainties in a wide and beautiful world. The traveler closes their eyes. The night deepens. The compass waits. Even in the darkest night, a small needle knows where north is and quietly waits to guide you when you are ready to move.